Bab Al Mandeb is a very important geostrategic point of geography located between the Yemen and the Djibouti. And slowly, the Yemenis war is taking over this part of the strait. This strait is Strait of Hormuz, called the Strait of Hormuz. Is very important because it connects Red Sea to the Arabian Sea, and through this, world's largest oil tankers they pass. And in case of the Middle East war getting escalated, the Bab Al Mandeb will become very significant because from here, the Saudi Arabia and its friends they will transfer the oil to the rest of the world and keep the economies of the world running. But last week, the Saudi Arabia for called for a very temporary halt for the oil passing through this Bab Al Mandeb because Saudis they believed that the Houthi rebels have attacked two tankers. You can simply understand the significance of the Bab Al Mandeb from this particular paper cutting that when the two oil tankers of the Saudi Arabia they were attacked and the Saudis cancelled their oil tankers to pass through the Bab Al Mandeb, the European Union market they got crashed because of the oil deficiency, and the prices of the oil in the European Union market they spiked like something. They spiked like something. Now hundreds of large containers they pass through the Straits of Bab Al Mandeb daily, and it is the very important responsibility for these countries to protect this Bab Al Mandeb because this will have a potential to escalate the oil prices, which will send many economies of the world crashing. Many economies of the world crashing. And the world also knows that Saudi Arabia and the UAE coalition they have launched an offensive at the port of Hudaydah, which is located opposite to this particular Bab Al Mandeb in Yemen. And the Saudi Arabia's offensive and complete block.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, let's first of all bear in mind that the Strait of Hormuz is by far more important in terms of maintaining the flow of oil and gas via sea to its various marketplaces around the world, with something like a third of all shipments of oil and gas in the world traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, as opposed to the shipping lane at Bab Al Mandeb. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, the loss of this shipping route could prove pivotal. But of course, what remains to be determined is what lies behind this. It could, for example, be just deployed to take some short-term profits in the derivatives market. It could be somehow related to putting political pressure on Sudan, for example. I mean, if it were to turn out that Sudan was also unable to ship via the Red Sea, that would leave Sudan in a very difficult position. It could also be about increasing the cost of oil shipments to China, bearing in mind that China takes about 80% of its oil imports shipped via the Strait of Malacca, with, of course, most of those shipments also originating through the Strait of Hormuz, but also shipments originating through the Red Sea, including all supply from Sudan, and that amounts to about 5% of China's oil imports. So we don't really know what's behind this, but what we can say is, in terms of security of oil supplies, as the United States ramps up its hostility towards Iran, and thereby puts at risk the shipping lane via the Strait of Hormuz, this development, which sees the ability of the KSA to bring its oil to market via the Red Sea, takes on a very important significance.
Talking of this particular port has created a humanitarian crisis in Yemen, and the people are dying without food. Saudi Arabia says that this particular action has been taken in order to safeguard the oil shipment paths to the rest of the world, and But despite a massive offensive started against the Houthi rebels of the Yemen and using the cluster bombs that were sold to the Saudi Arab and the UAE coalition by Britain, the Saudi Arabians have not been able to take over the Yemen, Bab Al Mandeb, except creating a humanitarian crisis. But the Saudi Arabia is now saying Saudi Arabians, they love creating the artificial scarcity of oil because this pushes the oil prices skyrocketing. And that's the very significance of the Bab Al Mandeb, which we are going now to utilize as a part of this particular lecture. The strategic choke points of the Indian Ocean is the subject matter of this very short lecture.
The international community, and in particular Atlantic world powers, to even speak about, let alone come to terms with, this belligerent Saudi war on Yemen. This is a war which was illegal in its inception, and certainly illegal in the way it's been prosecuted against Yemen from the start. This is a war that from the start has been supported fully by the United States, the United Kingdom, the United Nations itself, as well as a number of other Atlantic world nations. This is a war which has primarily targeted civilians, all in an effort to back Saudi Arabia's unreasonable, megalomaniacal geopolitical aspirations, to prop up a puppet president who overstayed the term of his presidency without making any plans to call an election, and then resigned and ran away. It's unacceptable. The death toll keeps being racked up higher and higher. The suffering is incomprehensible. And the Atlantic world's corporate media cartel remains, for all intents and purposes, entirely silent about the matter. So we don't know really how long this is going to be permitted to continue. What we do know is that there's an unholy alliance between the United States, its Atlantic world allies, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, all in pursuit of their various national interests, and which has resulted in Atlantic world powers, led by the United States, being more than willing not only to turn a blind eye to Saudi Arabia's crimes against Yemen, but to actively support them.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there for now. That's Eric Grossman, international lawyer, joining us via Skype from Bali. Mr. Grossman, it's always great having you with us here on Press TV.